On this Thursday night, rethinking the back-to-school routine. From class sizes to safety protocols, the confusion for students, parents, and teachers.
Staff have no idea how they're supposed to keep kids safe.
Plus, COVID-19 conundrum, the woman who keeps testing positive and has no symptoms. American police under fire again.
When I saw the video, I was very disturbed.
The arrest of a black man being called a cold-blooded murder. Pedaling forward to freedom, the Canadian invention revolutionizing life for people with spinal cord injuries. And pitch-perfect impersonator. The parrot spreading its wings as a pop diva.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with one of the biggest challenges in reopening the economy in the age of COVID-19. September means back to school, and that means teachers, parents, and millions of students are embarking on an experiment. What happens when you send kids to class in a pandemic? Some are still unsure about whether it's worth the risk. Even the Prime Minister said a few weeks ago his family hadn't decided. He has since revealed his 3 kids will be back in their classrooms and posted this on Twitter today. His youngest son, Hadrian, heading to grade 1. Back to school plans, whether it's in class, online, or a blended version of the two, and class size and spacing varies depending on where you live. In some regions, officials want kids back in class in person full time. In others, like Ontario, students have the option of remote learning. Schools there will gradually reopen over the next 2 weeks.
We're ready, and I'm not saying that there's not going to be bumps. There will be bumps in the road as sure as I'm standing here. But again, I have the confidence in the system, the teachers, the principals, and the school boards.
Not everyone is sharing that confidence. In tonight's top story, Eric Sorensen takes a closer look at Ontario and the complex back-to-school rollout.
How are you feeling about sending your kids back to school?
I'm a little nervous.
Matthew Boardman speaks for a lot of parents, uneasy about sending their kids to school.
COVID-19 is not a joke, but at the same time, life needs to get back to normal for everybody.
Kimberly DeRoss has made a difficult decision for her 7-year-old, and she's not alone.
I've chosen to keep him home with me. I've actually quit my job to do that. So he's going to be home, and we're going to see what the first couple weeks look like or months look like.
Schools like Ord Street School in Toronto will be little more than half full, but many teachers are concerned that class sizes will remain large.
Kids at my school will be coming to school with large class sizes, no social distancing, and just unsafe conditions.
The basic formula in an ordinary school year, classrooms full of kids, each with a teacher. But many kids in Ontario are being kept out by their parents, opting to have them learn from home. However, class sizes won't automatically become smaller. In many cases, students will be redistributed to retain standard size classes, and teachers will be reassigned, some to teach online, the kids staying home, leaving some classrooms empty and a last-minute shuffle for teachers.
A week and a half before the kids show up in our classrooms, we not only know who our students are, we also don't know what grade or what subject, and it's all up in the air.
I have all the confidence in all the principals and teachers going back to school. They're going to be the backbone of this program.
Bottom line, say some premiers, there isn't enough money to make classes smaller. Take Alberta, which wants all kids in classrooms.
There is no world in which you could reduce class sizes in half and reopen the schools for the current school year. You'd have to build 800 new schools and certify 13,000 new teachers. It's simply fictitious.
Back in Ontario, administrators say it's a lot of change so close to the school year.
Yes, this is very late in the game, but teachers are professionals, and given the time and the support, they will be very good teachers wherever it is they end up teaching.
Opening schools is only the start. Teaching and learning will only get more complicated if and when COVID-19 shows up in classrooms. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Parents and teachers in New Brunswick found out today what back to school will look like for them. That province released its operational plans. They're all available online. Each school developed individual approaches based on student population, facilities, and community needs. Full-time learning will be mandatory for all students, whether they're in class or at home. In Newfoundland and Labrador, the provincial government is creating new virtual teaching positions to help immunocompromised students who can't attend school. And more public health nurses will be hired for added support. Everyone is being encouraged to use the COVID-19 Alert app, which lets users know if they've been close to someone who's tested positive for the virus. Newfoundland and Labrador is the first province in Atlantic Canada to launch that app. Nova Scotia's back-to-school objective is to return to full capacity in the fall when classes resume next week. But the Nova Scotia Teachers Union is raising major concerns about the province's back-to-school strategy. And as Ross Lord reports, time is running out to get it right.
When classrooms in Nova Scotia open next week, Van Bernard won't be there.
It's a little bit upsetting that I can't see all my friends, but I'm happy that I'm home because I don't think I'd feel safe and secure if I were at school.
Van has spinal muscular atrophy. He uses a machine several times a day to clear his lungs of matter that could make him sick.
I would need one of my helpers to take off my mask if I were in school and be very, very close to me and put it on my face.
When he gets the flu, typically he ends up in the hospital with double lung pneumonia, 2-week stay, full antibiotics, IVs, breathing machines. So I can't even fathom what COVID would look like for him.
The Nova Scotia Teachers Union is also sounding the alarm, claiming conditions and policies for resuming classes are sorely lacking. The union says opening day, scheduled for next Tuesday, should be delayed.
There's no sanitizer for staff to train with. There are no safety protocols in place. So schools are chaos right now. Staff have no idea how they're supposed to keep kids safe.
The Nova Scotia government insists there's a practical plan in place, a plan that includes removing students who might be infected.
There's some anxiety associated with that, no question. But the rhetoric around schools being in chaos is just not helpful, not accurate.
Van and his family say there's no reassurance about protecting the most vulnerable students.
Nobody seems to know anything about how to social distance or how to safely integrate special needs children in the classroom and in the resource centers.
Van's parents are not experienced in homeschooling, but they say Van will start grade 8 at home until they're more confident he can attend classes in person safely. Ross Lord, Global News, Hammonds Plains, Nova Scotia.
In Quebec, a group of parents has gone to court to fight for the right to keep their kids home to learn remotely. In Quebec's Superior Court, the group said new back-to-school rules in the province are unfairly restrictive. They want an injunction issued to allow more students the option to learn from home. Right now, only students who qualify for medical exemptions can opt for virtual learning. What we need to keep an eye on as schools reopen is case numbers. And right now, they are rising in Quebec and across the country. 187 more people tested positive in Quebec today. That is the largest daily jump since July. Next door in Ontario, there were more than 100 new infections reported today for the 8th straight day. Cases are also going up in Western Canada. There were 130 new cases in Alberta today and 89 in BC. A Montreal woman is having trouble getting her life back to normal because of COVID-19. She has no symptoms, though she's tested positive for the virus more than half a dozen times. The story of her confusing case is coming up a little later. First, though, to the United States, the mayor of Rochester, New York, is suspending the officers involved in the arrest of a black man who died after being restrained by police in March. Daniel Prue, who had a history of mental illness, died of asphyxiation. Police had put what's called a spit hood over his head to keep him from spitting on them. A warning, the video is disturbing. Prue was naked and agitated. Rochester's mayor says what he needed was help.
Mr. Prue lost his life in our city. He lost his life because of the actions of our police officers. He lost his life because of the failure of a lot of different systems on that day.
It happened March 23rd in Rochester. This week, the family released part of the body cam video obtained from police. It shows the 41-year-old running naked through the streets before being handcuffed by the police, who then cover his head with a spit hood. At the time, COVID-19 was out of control in New York. The video shows officers push him face down onto the ground and hold him there until he becomes unresponsive. He was taken to hospital and died a week later.
If it was a police officer who was assaulted, this would have came out the same day. And it would have been on the news every day and every hour. It would have came out as soon as it happened. But black people's lives are devalued.
The medical examiner has ruled Prue's death a homicide caused by complications of asphyxia in the setting of physical restraint, excited delirium, and drug intoxication. The mayor said today Prue was failed by the police department, the mental health care system, society, and by her. The case of another unarmed black man, Jacob Blake, who was shot in the back by officers in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was in the spotlight again today. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden went to Kenosha. He met Blake's family and went to a community gathering to address the recent civil unrest. Biden says that unrest is not entirely President Trump's fault, but that Trump has legitimized a dark side of human nature. Jackson Proskow reports.
Today, it was Joe Biden's turn to visit Kenosha, where he met privately with the family of Jacob Blake, the Wisconsin man shot 7 times in the back by police. Blake joined by phone from his hospital bed.
He talked about how nothing was going to defeat him, how whether he walked again or not, he was not going to give up.
Later, at a public meeting, the former vice president pushed a message of healing and unity.
You have to take responsibility if you're a leader, a president. Start rebuilding.
2 days ago, the current president visited the city without acknowledging the reasons for a wave of protests that at times have turned violent.
The fact is that we've seen tremendous violence, and we will put it out very, very quickly if given the chance.
Polls show Americans trust Biden more than Trump to tackle issues of policing and criminal justice. The former VP is also well ahead with likely voters in Wisconsin and elsewhere, up 8 points here, 9 points in Arizona, and 4 points in North Carolina.
Send it in early.
Where on Wednesday, Trump suggested his supporters should think about voting twice, by mail and in person.
You send them in, but you go to vote. And if they haven't counted it, you can vote. So that's the way I view it.
Voting twice is illegal, but it's part of Trump's strategy to sow doubt about the validity of an election that may come down to the wire. A survey of major polls found that on average, Biden is 7.3% ahead of Trump nationally, far ahead of where Hillary Clinton was at this point in 2016.
Generally speaking, Biden is also leading in enough states to get over 270 electoral votes. So the person who needs the race to change really is Trump.
It seems the Republican and Democratic conventions barely move the needle for either candidate. Opinions are already baked in. With few left to win over, it seems this election will simply come down to who turns out to vote.
Jackson, absolutely nothing is certain in this election. What factors might be working in Trump's favor?
Well, he's got the Electoral College in his corner, Donna, and that means he could actually lose the popular vote by a wider margin than he did to Hillary Clinton back in 2016 and still keep the presidency, all if he manages to flip and hold on to the right states.
All right, still a long time between now and November 3rd. Jackson in Washington, thanks. It's 2 months until the U.S. presidential election, and social media is playing a big role in how people get their information. We know that. Facebook said today it will not accept any new political ads in the week before the U.S. election. However, nothing changes before that. And in the week before voting, political ads already running on Facebook can still have their target audience adjusted. Lies are still acceptable, too. Facebook will not fact-check political ads. The company says it will remove posts with misinformation on voting policies and the COVID-19 pandemic. In a Facebook post, CEO Mark Zuckerberg said this election is not going to be business as usual, and that it means helping people register and vote, clearing up confusion about how this election will work, and taking steps to reduce the chances of violence and unrest. Facebook's restrictions on political ads will lift the day after the election. Biking through barriers. Coming up, the Canadian invention helping people with spinal cord injuries. There's still so much we don't understand about COVID-19, and the mysteries are deeply frustrating. Tonight, we have the story of a Quebec healthcare worker who has tested positive multiple times. The first time was in May, and since then, every test she's taken has come back positive. She's never actually been sick, but as Mike Armstrong explains, the virus has put her life on hold.
I don't know where else to start other than how frustrating is this?
It's very frustrating. It's very frustrating, but also very stressful.
When she first tested positive for COVID-19, Sarah Laurence Côté thought she'd be fine in a couple of weeks. That first test came back May 6th. But as an orderly at this Montreal seniors residence, to be allowed back to work, she needed 2 negative tests. She hasn't been able to get even one. You go back and get tested again and again and again, and every time it comes back positive.
Yeah.
How many times so far?
8 times so far.
8 times?
8 times positive, yeah.
Well, keeping a positive attitude hasn't been easy. Côté's had some ups and downs. In June, doctors told her she wasn't contagious and allowed her to go back to work and school. She's studying nursing at the Cégep. But after another test last week, she was told it had been so long that she was now considered as having been reinfected. That caused some problems when she told the school it sent 50 of her fellow students home.
They asked them to quarantine either for 2 weeks or to come back with a negative result.
Because of you?
Yeah.
This kind of yes, no, positive or negative is not so helpful anymore.
This epidemiologist says Côté likely isn't contagious. What's showing up in the tests is probably dead particles of the virus, inactive and not dangerous. He says the longer the pandemic is around, the more cases like Côté's we'll see.
This is part of the reason why we changed the policy that we don't ask for people to have negative tests now. We go by time-based and clinical criteria.
How's your family doing?
They're stressed out.
Back in May, Côté was living with her boyfriend. He didn't catch it. Now she's living at her parents' home along with her grandparents. No one's caught it there either. But she does know what COVID-19 can mean. Back in April and May, the virus ripped through the seniors' residence where she was working.
It was hard. There was almost nobody there to help us. It was very hard.
And people died.
Yeah. The lady, the resident who I think I got the COVID from, who was tested positive, she passed away. Yeah, a lot. Yeah, it's very sad.
Côté says one of the things that's made it easier for her to cope is remembering how many people have had it worse than her. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Mirabel, Quebec.
Still ahead, the search for survivors after a cargo ship sinks near Japan. A search is underway off Japan where a massive ship carrying 43 crew and thousands of cattle has capsized. One person was rescued last night by a Japanese Navy aircraft. 42 others are still missing. The Panamanian ship was transporting 5,800 cows from New Zealand to China when it hit extreme weather brought on by Typhoon Maisuk. A couple of new appointments of note in Canada today. The Canadian Space Agency has a new president, Lisa Campbell, who was Associate Deputy Minister of Veterans Affairs. She becomes the first female president of the Space Agency. And Brad Regier is the new president of the Canadian Bar Association, the first time an Indigenous person has held that position. Regier is a partner in a Winnipeg law firm. Next, how a bike became a lifeline for 2 Albertans with spinal cord injuries. A spinal cord injury can change life in just seconds. And now a Calgary man injured in a skiing accident has invented an ingenious machine in his basement. It's a bike that's given him and others mobility they feared they'd lost. Jayme Doll has the story.
Just 2.5 years ago, JP Middleton's life took a giant pivot.
It's a feeling of absolute helplessness. You're lying there and you can't move your lower body. You know, I couldn't lift myself up. I was stuck in one position, and I'm now at the hands of, the people that I was once working with.
The former first responder instantly knew his own daunting fate the moment his body hit the ground after a crash skiing.
Terrifying, absolutely terrifying. You start thinking about the future before you're even in the ambulance. You're thinking of your family, you're thinking of your jobs, you're thinking of life going forward.
The Banff dad of 2 spent months in the hospital trying to navigate his new normal. And then one day, he saw something.
And one of my darkest days there out back of the hospital, and I heard this whizzing sound go past me, and I looked up and it was this Mad Max looking vehicle. When I saw this bike, I thought, I've got to get myself one of these things. It was a ray of hope for me.
A big part of the experience that I wanted was to go mountain biking with my friends. Just go out and have fun with them.
Christian Begg was the guy on that bike. He is the mastermind behind the Bowhead Reach, an all-terrain bike with an articulating front end and electric motor that will go anywhere.
It's an integral part of the experience because now you can keep up with people on a bike.
Begg also suffered a spinal cord injury on the slopes of Banff. He started building the bikes, and now riders include children and even former pro athletes going beyond what they thought possible.
They want to just go where they used to go. People will be doing like giant like motocross size ramps, or they'll be going out with their family, or they'll be, you know, going fishing for the first time in 5 years. Like the scope of what people do on it is insane.
It's become an extension of my body. You know, I take this bike everywhere with me. I need this to keep up with my boys.
Middleton says the bike not only restored his freedom, it's also led to a cherished friendship through the most difficult days of his life from someone who has been there too.
He's taught me just to persevere, to stay, you know, forward driven, to conquer all your fears and to move forward in life.
No matter how rough the path that lies ahead. Jayme Doll, Global News, Banff, Alberta.
Love that story. And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with a parrot parody. Okay, so that's Beyonce performing her hit, If I Were a Boy. And here's Chico, the parrot.
If I was a boy,
9-year-old Chico lives in a British wildlife park and is now taking requests. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
If I was a boy,